Here's Shed. Off the window, no. Roberts tried to get it. Shed for the win. Got it. Jamal Shed plays the hero again.
Back to pass. Donovan Smith. Smith steps up in the pocket, unloads it, throws it all the way downfield into the end zone. Tipped, and it is caught. Caught by the Cougars. Caught for a touchdown. Unbelievable. Caught by Stephon Johnson.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott Holland Podcast. Bobby, my absolute favorite podcasts are obviously the ones after U of H wins some kind of big thing, whether it's a big game, conference title, dramatic game, that kind of stuff. That's probably the genre of favorite podcast. I would say a close number two there, though, is the stuff we do here in August. The football season previews, the thinking about a week one, like you're still, like the season is still fresh. Like the reality of whatever the season, whether it's good or bad, hasn't fully hit. You're allowing the team to be the best version of itself, even if you're somebody who keeps repeating, don't have two expectations. Like you haven't been beaten down by the season as it is yet. And that's what I've really enjoyed about our podcast this month. That's what I'm going to enjoy about podcast tonight, where we preview the Cougar defense and special teams. And obviously talk about a big hire in the Cougar world. That was Eddie Nuñez being the new Houston Cougar athletic director, or whatever his specific title is. So a lot to talk about tonight. We have actual on-field results to talk about. Are they the best on-field results? Well, they're on-field results. I won't overpromise on that.
Results.
We have actual Houston Cougar sports also at the end after our two main topics to talk about as well. So I know it is just absolutely scorching hot. I told you before we started recording, I am doing a brief trip to see my folks here for the long weekend, and I could not have picked a worse time to go to Texas. So I'm excited to go from dry heat to just the suffocating humidity that I lived in for so many years. Friend, I know you just had to move. How you holding up?
Dude, actually surprisingly well. Yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday I finally got when you move like that, you don't take all your furniture with you. You're like, all right, it's a different space with less space, more space in various places. And so yesterday I finally finished putting together all my various pieces of furniture that I bought. So a bookshelf and some end tables for my living room. And it's finally getting things in places where you can start putting things where they go. It was kind of funny. I was talking to my mom about it, and I was like, I need to build my bookshelf for my office, but there's boxes in the way that have stuff that need to go on the bookshelf. So it's this weird kind of catch-22. So, but yeah, overall move went well. No major damage. Somehow my parents and myself didn't kill one another. So everything went well, and now it's just putting life together.
Love to hear it. We know we also love to hear about, Bobby, our Patreon. Patreon.com/SH podcast. I don't want to commit you to something. I would be like, pause, Sam, but I think we're going to do another season of post-game reacts for the patrons. We were 12 for 12 last year, Bobby and or myself. We both did a few solo, but for the most part, it was you and I hopping on as soon as we could after the game. To kind of give an immediate reaction to the Cougar game that was hopefully a little more optimistic. 12 games to come this season, but nice little perk if you're someone who supports us financially. We're going to keep doing those instant reacts that we know a number of you liked from the last football season. If you aren't doing that right now, but you're like, hey, that sounds good. I have a few bucks extra to kick these guys' way a month. Go to patreon.com/SH podcast, $5 a month or more. Never turn down more.
Never turn down more.
Never support the work that Bobby and I do here on a weekly basis. Please support our friends at Charlie Hustle as well by going to charliehustle.com, ordering one of their fantastic Cougar wearables, and using our promo code PAWD15, that's POD15, to save 15% on your order from Charlie Hustle. That's charliehustle.com. And I'm going to link it in the description of this episode again, but consider also supporting the Third Ward Racket Club by buying some Third Ward Racket Club merch, with 100% of the profits going to Cougar Tennis, the Ascendant program with an exciting new head coach that I'm excited to help support with this little Third Ward Racket Club venture. Bobby, I think that's all the housekeeping. Let's talk about that big news that I mentioned at the top here.
News? I was moving.
An athletic director. White smoke from the steeples on Cullen Boulevard. I don't remember enough Catholic school stuff I think the white smoke is the Pope I want to say when there's a new pope in the Vatican, there's the white smoke.
Yeah, you went to Catholic school. Catholic school.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's on you, buddy.
That's 100% on me. That's 100% on me. That the white smoke from the steeples on the Athletics and Alumni Center on Cullen Boulevard, signaling Eddie Nuñez. It took us almost 2 full months, but we long last have a new athletic director. We had actually not this news, but kind of the pre-news to the news break during our pod that the search was winding down. Per Joseph Duarte, U of H at that point was down to 2 finalists, New Mexico athletic director Eddie Nuñez, who would get the job, and Tennessee deputy AD / chief revenue officer Ryan Alpert. Saturday afternoon, we kind of had a slow leak of news suggesting that Nuñez would be the hire from like the morning, late morning. I think kind of starting the national side with ESPN's Pete Thamel saying that the search had, I think it was zeroed in on Nuñez. And
what a great line, by the way.
Yeah, love, don't love. The scoop guys kind of like laying the groundwork, but was confirmed subsequently by the local beat guys, Joseph Duarte and then Jeff Grammer on the UNM side for the Albuquerque Journal. By the end of the day, confirmed also by both universities and Nuñez himself. Bobby, to pass to you here, I know in our talking back and forth between our last show and this one that Nuñez was your top choice out of the two guys I just mentioned that were finalists. Kind of start this off here. What did you like about him that made him your choice for this new athletic director, or the athletic director vacancy, and now being our new athletic director?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the weird things was, as it kind of leaked out that there were going to be, that we were going to, once we opened up the search and all that, some names came out, and then Nuñez wasn't really on that list.
It's like a second. I remember the first it was a secondary name. Like, oh, do they excite
we
you?
were like, oh, here's this one.
It was in the College of Charleston guy. We were like they seem qualified, but they don't like blow us out of the water.
And then I don't remember the Tennessee guy being listed at all. I when he came up, I was kind of like, oh, hold on, wait a minute, what? Who's this guy? But once it was down to those two, to your point, I knew who I wanted. Comes from University of New Mexico. And just my initial thought when I first saw it was, in our discussions, I wanted somebody from a smaller school, something like that, because at Tennessee, at LSU, where there were a lot of people, it's easy to fundraise there, right? Like, I'm not saying it's an easy job to do, but for example, at Tennessee, right, if you are the head of fundraising for the University of Tennessee, it's pretty easy because all the CEOs you're talking to, all the owners of companies probably went there, or they went to somewhere like Middle Tennessee State, or they went to Memphis, right?
They're t-shirt Vol fans.
Yeah, they're t-shirt Vol fans. And it's kind of easy to fundraise there. And when you can fundraise, everyone wants to be associated in the state of Tennessee with the University of Tennessee, right? And so if they're not an alum there, 75% of their staff are fans. It's one of those situations where you walk up to somebody and say, hey, do you want to put your name on the side of our building? It'll cost you $100,000. They usually go, yeah, because they want to be involved in that program. They want to have their name associated with that program. And as much as us Cougar fans want to say we are, a great institution, which we are, and all of those things, we are not the flagship of the state. We're, and I guess you could say New Mexico is, UNM is, but it's not like Tennessee, right? They're not going to fundraise like Tennessee. People don't want to be as associated with that university as they do Tennessee. So the fact he was able to fundraise pretty well at UNM got me pretty excited because there's a unique challenge at the University of Houston. A lot of the people that we are going to try and fundraise off of, the business owners, the CEOs, are not U of H alumni. They're going to be t-shirt fans, to your point, of Texas A&M, Texas. And we have to build the value in U of H. And Nuñez seems like a guy who can build value in a smaller program. Sam, let me ask you something. Can you tell me who the official NIL partner of U of H is?
No. I could hem and haw. I mean, Lincoln
There's
Cougs?
probably two people, Lincoln Cougs. And,
yeah, I was going to say Cougs.
I would say Ryan over at Go Cougs.
Yeah.
He does some NIL stuff, but overall, there's not an official NIL partner. Do you know who has an official university NIL partner?
I'm going to just a guess based on who we're talking about, New Mexico.
New Mexico does. The University of New Mexico has that set up with something called 505 Sports Ventures, and they put out a lot of really cool content, and they're sponsoring about 12 athletes, it looked like,
But
on their
if
website.
you don't know, the 505 is like the Albuquerque area code.
I figured as much.
Yeah.
I kind of put those two and two together. I didn't want to assume, but yeah. I mean, 505 Sports Ventures is out here. They're sponsoring like 12 players. They do, it was weekly or daily, I can't remember now, content where they're putting stuff out and they're interviewing different people and they're getting people in the community excited about it. And they have an official NIL partner. 505 Sports Ventures is the official NIL partner of the University of New Mexico. We're in the fourth largest city in America, maybe third now. Why would we not have something like that? And it just shows that Nuñez is here to raise some money. He knows and accepts this new generation of college football, college sports, where paying players is imperative. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to do it to be competitive. And he, at least, while he may not be the guy who does it himself, he's at least open to it and wants to get it done. And then here's the other thing. I went to the Lobo Club website versus the Cougar Pride website. I don't know if you did this, Sam.
I did not, actually, so I'm glad you did.
The Lobo Club website, hands down better than Cougar Pride. Hands down, right? Cougar Pride, you got to kind of, the homepage is just 3 pictures that kind of scroll side by side. And then there's a donate now button. And you got to kind of dig to, if you don't click that donate now button, if you want to donate, you know, and be a special donor who donates high amounts of money, it's kind of difficult to figure out how to do it on the Cougar Pride website. And that's why the last AD isn't here anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Because it wasn't easy to donate money. It wasn't easy to do those kind of things. It just, he didn't seem like he cared very much about it. One of the tabs on the Cougar Pride website is the UH Wheels Club. And it's a like special designation where you can get coaches. If you're a car dealership, you can donate a car, and for every car you donate, you get like 8 season tickets to football. And like that's a great idea. But
I had never heard of that until 10 seconds ago, Bobby.
And we are some of the biggest U of H fans.
We'll just say connected. We'll just say we're very engaged.
It's a tab on our website, and while I think that's a great program, I'm sorry, but how many car dealerships are going to the website going, oh look, there's this opportunity to. One, we should already be reaching out, telling dealerships about this. I have a friend who's a GM at a car dealership. I will text him after this and report back if he knows about this program. He's the GM.
Someone who would probably normally.
He sold a car to a future Cougar. Kid has a he sent me his picture with him. Like, the guy sells cars. He's a U of H guy. I mean, he's not a U of H guy. He went to HCU. And so, but he will support
got us my tickets on the 50-yard line at HCU's 2015 home opener.
Yeah, same guy. But like, he'll support U of H, you know, especially me and him have become better friends. You know, he'll do little stuff like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, if he doesn't know about it, he's in Pearland. We have 2 dealerships. Why are we advertising that? Everyone should know about it. Everyone should know about it. You shouldn't have to put it on the website. That's built for fans and donators. And donators? Donors. Jeez, that's going to need to be edited out. But in all seriousness, like, it just doesn't seem like we really knew what we were doing Cougar Pride wise. And that's no shot at the staff at Cougar Pride. That comes from the top down. Seems like we wanted to try, but it didn't work very well. And what we were doing wasn't working. And that's why Nuñez, who is shown on the Lobo Club that he gets a website that works and looks good, breaks down what your money goes to. They have a chart where it shows you exactly how much money they need just in scholarships every year to make their athletic program work. To just base level, not paying NIL, not paying players, just scholarship and food and travel and that kind of stuff. And they have that on their website. And now the entire Lobo community knows this is how much money we need to fundraise if we want to make this work.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And I think you kind of asked a rhetorical question earlier. Why is this, the disorganization with NIL? Why is this happening? And I don't think it's because it wasn't an opposition, I don't think, to NIL from the chief executive of this, Chris Pesma at the time. But I think it was a not knowing, not being, I don't know, not to be mean here, not being qualified for what is asked of an athletic director now from 2021 to present versus what was asked of an athletic director when he was hired at the beginning of the calendar year of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the chief differences there.
In Pesman's job, sorry to interrupt you. Pesman's job, the reason why Pesman was hired is because Pesman was really good at shaking hands and kissing babies. And his job was to get us into the Big 12. And I think that's what he was hired to do, was to get us into the Big 12. I think U of H probably would have ended up in the Big 12 with how everything fell anyways, but I
bristle when he's given too much credit for that, not out of any dislike of the guy. I feel like that's much more at the Couture level, I think, that kind of lobbying.
But I just think that was his job. I think he was hired to do that. And I think that he did good enough at it that we got the invite. To your point, I think Couture did a lot of that and that lobbying in the state and all that kind of stuff. But to think Pesman did nothing, but that was Pesman's job. Bring in a U of H guy who can hype up U of H, who can tell you all the great things about U of H. And now he accomplished his job. He was let go because he didn't move forward with it. And now we have the guy to take us to the next level, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say, my point there is just, I don't know if any direction was necessarily coming from the chief executive there. Worth doing some quick background on Nuñez. He was hired at UNM at the very start of the 2017 season. Very similar to how he was hired now. Was hired at the actual, I think it was on the 31st of August that year. Was in the AD's chair for 3 pretty big hires there. 2 football head coaches, Danny Gonzalez and Bronco Mendenhall, and Richard Pitino in men's basketball, which if you don't know, that is UNM's pride and joy sport, is men's basketball. They have a 15,000 seat basketball arena that they fill up regularly. The Pit, one of the more well-known and fearsome venues in college basketball. And I want to talk about his worst hire of the big 3 first. You can't spin the results on Danny Gonzalez. He won 13 games in 4 years. I think I'll just say, in Nuñez's defense, it's one of those hires that made sense on paper at the time. He was a New Mexico football alum, deep ties to its most successful head coach, maybe ever, in Rocky Long, who he played for when he was defensive coordinator there, was an assistant for him early in his career, had a good reputation in the Western United States, and still failed in reality. But I think Nuñez also made one of the better hires of this most recent football coaching cycle. He brought in former BYU and Virginia head coach Bronco Mendenhall to replace Gonzalez. And obviously it's TBD how Mendenhall does at a place like New Mexico, where sustaining football success has proven really difficult this century. But hiring a guy who's been the best head coach this century at 2 different schools, each of which has their own unique challenges, and a program like UNM, which I think has had historical struggles, it's a coup. I think no exaggeration. The Pitino hire, I think, paid off this past season, his 3rd one in Albuquerque. The Lobos were back in the NCAA tournament as an at-large team. Worth noting that, or at least a team with an at-large resume. I can't remember if they ended up winning the Mountain West out here in Vegas, but a team that had an at-large resume. I think, again, worth reiterating that by far their most passionately supported sport is men's basketball. And I believe a lot of the goodwill that Nuñez seems to have gotten from the Lobo fan base at large is the fact that the Pitino hire produced a level of basketball that the fan base expects. It also seems like he made well-received hires in tennis, track and field, and baseball, was in charge when they won 22 conference titles, which I think is a good return for one of the more resource-efficient schools in that conference. Like you said, the 505, the NIL thing that they did, really, really impressive. Did a reorg of their athletic fundraising group, the Lobo Club, which you also mentioned. Changed, multimedia rights. Dealt with COVID-19, which was especially difficult because they weren't able to play, I think, any sporting events in the state. Like, they had to go to West Texas to do sporting events and stuff during that period, and had apparently dealt with the logistics of that really well. And I think what I like most is the last, the one of the last things I said, that he managed after 7 or 8 seasons in a difficult job at a difficult place to leave there with most everyone thinking highly of him, and leaving both of their flagship or revenue generating, whatever you want to call them, sports, football, men's basketball, in a better state or with better regarded leadership than when he arrived. I don't think the positive vibes are a guarantee he'll be a success at U of H. This is a challenging job in its own right. I think his job number one, his first job, the thing that he's going to be judged on, I think when it's all said and done, is that he needs to figure out a way to get those of us in Houston Cougardom to open up our pocketbooks and donate a bit more.
Yeah, I think for me, to your point on his hires, I don't think he was brought in to do hires. Like, obviously that's going to be part of his job. He was brought in to raise money. And I think, honest to goodness, our administration, Couture, the Board of Regents, Tillman, everybody there believes we have the right coaches in place in football and basketball.
Yeah,
and
I think everyone would agree with that.
Yeah. I think Sampson basically has a contract till he wants to retire, right? Unless
and
things
then
go.
His son's pretty much.
Yeah, and his son's coach in waiting, right? And you're going to at least have, you're going to have Fritz here for, I really hope at least 4 years. Unless
he'll get 4.
Unless he goes out and we go 14-0, and then he gets poached by somebody, which no one's big enough to get poached.
Champagne problem.
Yeah. I will cross that bridge when it comes. I think the leadership of this athletic department is set up with stability that we haven't had in a very long time for at least the next 4 years. I think you're going to see the same football coach for at least the next same 4 year for at least. You're going to see the same football coach for at least 4 years. The basketball coach isn't changing. You're going to have a stable AD. And now I think this is the time where we are going to start seeing some dividends on our lower non-revenue sports. I think we're going to start to see a very stable athletic program. I don't think that, as long as we've been fans, you became a fan. Obviously, you saw some U of H games when you were a kid, but I'd say we became fans in 2007. I remember watching the 2006 because I knew I was going to U of H. I remember watching the.
I would say 2006 football season was probably the point where
I think the second half of that. I think the second half of that. I watched that. I watched that Liberty Bowl. I remember doing that, right? But it's ever since we've been fans in that 2006, 2007, we haven't had a ton of stability in our athletic department, right? I think Duarte tweeted out that he's seen like 3 ADs.
Let's go through all the ones we've had. Dave Maggard.
Yep.
Mac Rhodes. Hunter Yurachek.
Oh, I forgot about Hunter Yurachek. Yeah.
He was only here for a minute, but with the Arkansas job. Chris Pesman, and now AD Nuñez. That's 5 in 17 years. That's a turnover every 3 years or so.
Yeah, that is not stability that you are looking for, right? Football coaches. Do we even need to name all of them? I mean,
Numerous.
Basketball coaches. We've had 4, right? Who was it? We had Penders. No, 3.
7 football. No, I was doing the football coaches.
Okay, 7 football coaches.
Yeah,
5 ADs. Years. 5 ADs. 3 basketball coaches.
Yeah, 3. Penders,
Dickey, and Sampson. I mean, that's so much change. That's so much change, and I feel like we finally are going to see some stability for the next 4 to 5 years. And maybe Sampson retires in the next 4 years, right?
Well, again, you have a succession.
But you have his son, you have the succession plan. It'll be a little bit of a change, but you're going to see. And it's also like one of those with Sampson. It feels like in terms of the stability, he's going to retire, but he's not going to leave the team, right? Like his son's going to take over, but you'll see Sampson in the club level, right? You'll see Kelvin in the club level, just kind of watching, pacing, watching, that kind of stuff. So I haven't been this excited for the stability of this athletic program in a very long time. I don't think we're going to see changes, I think we're going to see changes on some of our Olympic sports and some of our other sports.
It's 3. Really, like soccer, and unless someone gets poached because they are winning too much, soccer and the 2 bat and ball sports are for all very different reasons.
And
probably the only ones. That's a small
and a basketball and one of the basketball.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, not the one coached by Sampson. Sorry.
So I think you'll see some changes there, but in terms of the revenue sports, it's going to be a very nice. Hopefully, we're not talking too much about major changes.
Yeah, with Nuñez also, you've already kind of touched on this, but I like that he comes from a program that has some financial constraints. New Mexico has very passionate fans, but the state at large is one of the poorest in the union. Like I think Nevada, the state I live in right now, I would say pretty poor state. Imagine like that state with the large casino aspects like subtracted from it, and it's a beautiful state. Like I love New Mexico. I visited a few times.
Amazing.
Yeah, Ruidoso is amazing. White Sands and Las Cruces too. Big fans of those two places, but not the richest state.
Nope.
And I was gonna say, you mentioned like they had their Lobo Club's annual Cherry and Silver Gala, big start of the year fundraiser thing. The night they was reported to be hired by U of H, and they raised, they brought in a record over $1 million just from that event. Is that solely because of Nuñez? No, these things are always a group effort, but clearly Nuñez wasn't falling down on raising what money could realistically be raised at that job. I don't think UNM and U of H are perfect analogs, but this isn't a guy who's, to what you were talking about earlier, his sole professional fundraising experience is raising dollars at a program with a large, rich fan base or being the program of that state. And again, to be fair, won't say that was necessarily the resume of the other finalists. Ryan Alpert, he did good stuff fundraising at FAU in Memphis, and Mizzou, which I would say is cash-strapped relative to a lot of the SEC programs. But I like with Nuñez the combination of a guy who has almost a decade of experience now as the chief executive of an athletic department, and that department was not one where fundraising could be described as a turnkey operation. Now, this other guy I think could have been a good hire, but when you and I kicked around Jeremiah Dickey, Boise State's athletic director, you pointed out, and let me know if I'm summarizing what you said incorrectly, but I think what your gist was, Boise's fundraising is a different kind of animal than U of H. Yes, they're a group of 5, but they are still the de facto pro team of a metro area that's almost 500,000 people. The de facto pro team almost of an entire state with plenty of alums all over, and by the standards of their current conference situation, much more of a have than a have not, which I don't think fits with what U of H is. It doesn't say Dickey couldn't have succeeded at U of H, but I think UNM in the Mountain West is a much closer comp to U of H's situation as a new Big 12 athletic program. Would you say I'm summarizing what you said accurately?
Yeah. I think for me, I want to tread lightly because I know U of H fans are going to hear this and be like, we're nowhere near UNM. And look, I understand we're not. We're in a better spot than UNM. That's why we were able to poach their athletic director. But us in the Big 12 is more, to your point, Sam, like where UNM is in the Mountain West.
We're bottom 4 or 5 in the conference in terms of resources right now, easily. Yes. And that's where UNM is in the Mountain West.
We're taking a loan from our endowment.
Oh, man, yeah.
We're taking a loan from the endowment to fund our
operating costs,
while also being the school that subsidizes from students more than any other G4 program. Or at least we're one of them. P4. Why did I say G4? It's old habits die hard, baby. P4, right? We're already heavily funded by students, and now we're taking money from the endowment. We are on the lower end of the P4. And it just kind of is what it is. We wanted to be here. We're not getting the full share from the Big 12 yet. It's a different beast. He's got potential to raise more money than he could ever dream of at UNM. The problem is we're not at a point where we're raising that much money yet. We're going to under his leadership, hopefully. But right now we are not where we are competitive with the haves in the P4.
Yeah. I think my last point here, I think hiring someone who had extremely good vibes around them in their last job is not a guarantee of success, but the bad vibes hires also rarely work out. Even though I think, to use one recent example, I think the West Virginia fan base was more sour on Dana Holgorsen than he deserved, given what he did at that program as a first-time head coach. But that's probably your recent U of H Exhibit A of a guy leaving his last job, the last fan base saying, generally, you're not going to like this guy's deal. And unfortunately, that fan base being largely right about that. I guess my point with Nuñez, being an AD can be a thankless job. You're judging the performance of a number of different sports teams. Even if you ace nearly all of your hires or decisions of who to extend, if even one of those goes bad, especially if one of those is football or men's basketball, a lot of your other good work could kind of get ignored. So I would say the sheer outpouring of goodwill that we've seen from UNM fans, alums, people who work for Nuñez tells you that not only was this someone who's good at his job, but was also good to work for and treated people right. And I think that's a good starting point. It's not a guarantee of anything, but just a good first impression to me. Time will tell if he succeeds here. None of the other good stuff that we like on his resume coming up to taking this job guarantee anything in the future, but I think the past experience means he's a good fit for what's going to be a difficult job. And I think why the two of us are pretty sold on the hire.
Yep. I have nothing to add on top of that. We mentioned his successes with his teams: 53 NCAA tournament appearances, 22 Mountain West titles. That's pretty good. They may not all be in football and basketball. Excuse me, but I'll take 22 titles. That is a fun thing to do.
Right? Let's talk about some Cougar football, Bobby.
All right, man. We're 2 weeks away. Let's do it.
Yeah, we are currently in a week where college football is going to be played. It's the mini week 0 slate, so it's not a buffet of offerings, but it's a little appetizer plate. You get a little bit of
these are the hors d'oeuvres.
These are the hors d'oeuvres. You get an hors d'oeuvre of SMU hopefully tripping over their dick in Reno and losing to UNR on Saturday. Probably aren't that lucky. Probably not going to get that. But Delaware State playing at 12:30. Delaware State play at 12:30 a.m. Eastern at Hawaii, which is available on a free app. Which, depending on how busy my I'm gonna be in Texas actually, so probably not on that. So
and did you see what happened with Delaware State today?
Oh yeah, like their flight or something like that.
Yeah, their flight, and now they're flying two separate. They have to fly commercial to, and they got to split the team in half, and half can go on one flight, half can go on the other.
That's brutal. Quick aside, I think people don't realize like the map doesn't do it justice. Like the LAX, which is probably more common, like the LAX to the islands flight is essentially the equivalent of like a cross country flight. So you're doing 2 cross country flights. Like, come on, I'm sure Delaware State's getting like some money for this, but is it like 2 cross country flights worth? Like, I don't know. But get to the relevant football at hand. We're talking this week. We did our offense preview last week. I would encourage you. We have not yet done anything to make it outdated, so please go back and listen to episode 1002. Check out our offense preview if you've not done so already. If you haven't listened yet, kind of our format this year, we're not going to do the position group by position group thing. I think we wanted to kind of change up how we did, the previewing this year. So we're doing kind of in the format of discussion questions, discussion topics between the two of us. Last week was offense. This week will be defense and special teams, which I would say definitely been the worst side of the ball the last years. You had one notable high point now 3 seasons ago, the 2021 season, where the Cougs had a fun defense that may have feasted on some not so great offenses on the schedule, but very exciting guys in that defense. DeAnthony Jones, future NFL cornerbacks, and Marcus Jones and Demarion Williams. It was a very fun defense to watch, whatever you think about the level of competition. But then I would say not much else the 2 years since then to be excited about. Like, obviously, the offense never really met expectations under Dana Holgorsen, considering he was this guy we saw put together just off. Well, I mean, well-deserved reputation from his time at U of H of putting some incredible explosive passing offenses in the field, and we just only saw maybe half a season of that to close the 22 season, in all honesty, over 5 years. But probably a bigger reason that he's not employed is the fact that the defense was just not good at all by any definition. Bottom quarter of the country kind of defenses these last 2 seasons.
Our DC was like about to get hired, and we paid him a ton of money.
I mean, they fired a DC after his second season, Joe Cawthon, who had done an amazing job, but was not a DC that we were like, oh yeah, this guy's like about to get, like we have seen some guys like, oh yeah, this assistant's about to get canned because they're terrible. They didn't do great, but did about what expected. And he got canned like real late in the 2020-21 coaching cycle because they were worried Doug Belk was getting a DB's job on one of the the blue blood SEC programs and wanted to keep him as a DC, which was really paid off for that one season and the 2 seasons after. Just the 2 NFL cornerbacks, turns out, Bobby, were load bearing on this defense. Didn't really have a good backup plan once Marcus Jones and Demarion Williams.
You mean it's more about Jimmys and Joes than X's and O's sometimes?
Believe it or not. I think you and I, when we talked about offense and defense before we did these previews, I kind of asked you, like, what were you trying to be offensively? We both kind of agreed we weren't really sure what they were trying to do offensively, and that I think lack of a clear direction from the head coach, bled into offenses that definitely didn't achieve their potential more often than not. But the defense, I think we sort of had a clear idea of what they were trying to be. They just did not have anything close to the personnel to do it.
They just weren't good enough at it.
And quite frankly, it didn't look to my at least somewhat untrained eye like a defensive guys that were coached well. It's just like the tackling in space was bad. Anytime we play a team that just ran a lot of fakes, did a lot of eye candy, did a lot of things that really test kind of your discipline as a defensive player, the Kansas game in 22 was, I think, maybe exhibit A of that. It didn't feel like our defense more often than not came up aces on that. It really didn't. It didn't seem like guys were prepared.
Yeah, there was no staying home on the play action.
That kind of stuff. So that's hopefully a thing in the past. The Cougars bring in Shia Wood, a guy who I think we're going to get to later, has a pretty impressive track record as defensive coordinator. But I think we should start here with maybe a more 30,000 foot level question, Bobby, and you can kind of interpret it however you want to. You could get as vibes or as numbersy or as mixture of the two as you want. What is a realistic? Because of course, everyone's defense is top 25 in scoring defense.
Right.
Gets a bazillion sacks, but also doesn't get burned deep. What is a realistic successful defense in year one of the Willie Fritz era look like here, in your opinion?
All right, so I know you probably looked this up, but I'm going to ask you how many points per game did we give up last year?
I actually didn't. I'm such an advanced metric snob now. I know it's over. It's like early to mid 30s.
31.5 points per game.
It's lower than I thought, but I bet that Sam Houston game is dragging the average down.
How many yards per game did we give up?
I think it's like about 415, 420.
424. Okay.
Not bad.
Now, it is pretty bad. I hate to break it to you.
No, my guess is not bad.
Oh, no. Your guess was great. Your guess was
I watched 12 games this defense. You can, I know they were bad.
So, we only had we were only ahead of 4 other P4 programs who gave up more points than us. There's only 4. Those were Arizona State, Cal, Baylor, and Vandy. Those are not teams.
Cal was actually decent. I think Cal was at least bowl level last year. That was the one surprising. I know Baylor. Yeah, Baylor and Arizona State were, if possible,
and Vandy.
Vandy. Yeah.
Those are not teams you really want to be associated with and on the same level with if you hope to be a good program, right? And they were probably saying the same thing about us last year, right? They're the Commodore Cadet podcast is probably saying, "Oh God, Houston was ahead of us." So, no shots at anybody, but for me, I want to see that points per game go down to something in like the 26 range. I think that's something reasonable to expect. That gets you middle of NCAA. You're a middling defense. You're somewhere in the middle. If you can get down to 26 points per game, that's a massive improvement. With this schedule, it might not be possible. I'll be honest with you. That OU game is looming large, but maybe you don't give up. What did we give up to Rice last year? 40. Maybe you 43. Don't give up. Yeah, maybe you don't give up 43 to Rice this year. Maybe you replace Sam with OU, and maybe you don't give up 43 to Rice. I don't know. We could, but I'm thinking if you can cut it down to 26, that gets you middle of the road as a defense in the NCAA. I feel like that's something that we can shoot for this year and actually achieve. The easy answer would be like cut it down to below 30 a game, but that's a 1.5. I wanted to set it where we could maybe achieve it. It would be difficult to achieve it, but if you can go 26, 27 points per game, I think that also with the changes in the offense is going to give this team a chance to win some games. So that's kind of my expectation going into this year, that we lower the points per game. I'd like to see it at 26, but I could do something in the 27 range, 28 range.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really hurt this defense, I think, is actually not to talk about the offense and the defense preview, was actually the offense. I did not really look at so much at the counting stats, but one thing that caught my eye when I looked at like the UofHCougars.com stats page for last year's team, this offense did an awful job possessing the ball, man. Like It was like 26, 27 minutes per game, meaning your defense was on the field over half the time. And your eyes could have told you last year's offense had some high points, but had some games where they just were really terrible for really long stretches of the game. That burns your defense. It always has a knock-on effect to your defense. So I want an expectation set here a bit. SP Plus isn't a perfect metric. I'm probably the bigger believer in its usefulness out of the two of us, but I think it does a good job waiting for things like strength of opponent that maybe like your raw point totals don't illustrate as well. In this case, SP Plus tells you what you all saw if you're a Cougar fan with your own eyes, that U of H was not a good defensive team. We were 102nd out of 130 teams in defensive SP Plus last year, 99th in 22 the season before that. it does at least confirm, though, that no, this was not an unlucky defense. This was a bad defense, whether you use advanced or standard statistics. And again, for that big high point that the 21 defense was, Doug Buck was never able to field a good defense that didn't have two future NFL quarterbacks, along with some borderline pro, good college players in your defensive front. And it's important to remember, Bobby, this year's team is going to lose some good defensive players from last year. This defense that we've talked now several times about not being very good. Nelson Caesar, first team all Big 12 guy, led the Big 12 in sacks last year. Two big transfers out, interior defensive lineman Jamari Caldwell was at Oregon and cornerback Isaiah Hamilton, who's now at Ole Miss. Expectation setting, guys. The defensive staff are good coaches. These aren't miracle workers. This was a bad defense that lost arguably its three best players, certainly three of its very best players from last season. So I think in the broadest sense, what I want to see this year is just periodic evidence that this new scheme can produce against teams that aren't terrible D1 offenses. Because we really only saw that one time all of last season. You know, I'd say the last 2.5 quarters against UT Austin. Mm-hmm. That's it. Like the only other times where you saw an offense not carve up the 23 Cougar defense were teams that had terrible offenses. Your Sam Houstons, your Cincy's, your Baylor's, or in UTSA's case, a team that was drastically worse at the beginning of the year versus what they were the final 2 months. Bobby, I personally just want 1 to 2 games next season where the Cougar defense isn't a liability against a better offense. It's not going to always work. Just you don't have the personnel in yet to necessarily believe it's always going to work, but a couple of games where we could see what a fully functional defense looks like here. And then maybe hope that, 25 and 26, we have more of the horses to produce something close to what Kyle Wood, the defensive coordinator, has done over his previous stops. Because you're asking a lot in 1 year for this to go from a bad defense to anything better than just a slightly below average defense. Would love to be wrong on that, but your schedule is not friendly and the returning production is not friendly to doing that.
Just a point of clarification. I do like SP Plus. I forget about SP Plus.
Just less an advanced stat guy. That was my general point. I'm not saying
you're I get advanced stats, but sometimes I'm much more of a vibes guy, which does not.
I'm becoming more of a vibes guy.
Yeah. I've always been a vibes guy. You and I used to have arguments when we were in college. I don't know if you remember this.
Probably.
But we'd come out of halftime and I would just be like, oh yeah, this team's pumped up to come out of halftime. And you'd be like, it doesn't matter. And I would just always be like, oh no, this team came ready to play today. And I could just tell just based on the juice that was pregame. And you'd be like, you're such an idiot. Basically, you just got to be like that. So I'm much more of a vibes guy. But yeah, I think we basically said the same thing there, right? You come in with the SP Plus and go, hell yeah, we were 109, and then I come in and go, yeah,
102, man. We're
102, yeah.
7 other shitty teams.
We were 102, and I'm going yeah, we were one of the worst P4 programs in terms of points per game and yards per game. We were dog shit. So it's I think my expectations are a little bit higher than yours. I get what you're throwing down. You need you kind of need the horses to, again, Jimmy's and Joe's, have to execute the X's and O's, right? But I look at our transfers, and there were a lot of transfers that kind of popped in this year. We to quote you earlier today, a dog shit amount of, an absurd amount of linebackers that we brought in this year. We definitely brought in a lot of talent, and it definitely feels like one of those situations where we're just throwing a lot of bodies at it and seeing what's going to work this year. So speaking of that, seeing what's going to work, new scheme this year, moving to a 3-4, which would make you think about the linebackers, bringing those in. So what do you think that's going to look like? What do you think the new scheme is going to look like under new DC Shalwood?
Yeah, I think the caveat is defenses this era are all going to show a number of different looks. So saying any defense is exclusively 3-4, 4-3, nickel, etc.
Nickel is base a lot of times now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nickel is probably the closest thing to our base last year. 3-3-5 stack as well, but I would say probably 3-4 base defense here. Everything seems to indicate that the 3 down linemen look. Shyle Wood, who we've mentioned a couple of times now, was Tulane's defensive coordinator under Willie Fritz last season when the Greenway defense was far and away the better of the two units of their offense and their defense.
They only allowed 20.5 points per game. They were top 25 nationally in rush yards allowed, forced almost 2 turnovers per game. Before that, he was actually the DC to the guy who's now Tulane's head coach, John Summerall at Troy. The Trojan defense was absurdly good for that level, allowed 17 points per game, were top 10 nationally in scoring defense. The Trojans as a team won 12 games and won the Sun Belt, were 8th nationally in turnovers forced, as well was D coordinator Army in 21 when they had a good defense there, won 9 games, were inside the national top 20 in a number of key stats, and was also his first defensive coordinator job back in 2017 at his alma mater at the FCS level. Wofford led a unit that was top 30, I think, in opponent yardage, and was on a team that won their conference and went to the playoffs as well. So this is his first P4 coordinator gig, but this man has put in a bunch of really good defenses on the field at a bunch of different places. Not guarantee of anything. He has a tough job, as we've kind of already laid the groundwork for, but reading his resume really did remind me of Todd Orlando when he came in as Herman's DC for 2015. Not saying you get the year one results that Todd Orlando got here, but Todd Orlando came as a guy who had been a bunch of different stops. All of them to that point had also been group of 5 schools, or probably lower profile group of 5 schools than U of H was at the time. And I was like, this guy just gets good defensive results wherever he goes. And that's kind of the read again with Shalwood. Before we even get into like the scheme itself, I think it's going to be 3 down linemen more often than not, more linebacker heavy, kind of like you said, that worth reminding ourselves that, hey, like the immediate results this year might not be amazing, but this is a guy has the goods. He's proven he can put good defenses on the field before he's gotten here. So this is a guy with the resume you would want a defensive coordinator coming under a new staff to have.
Yeah, absolutely. You brought up the name Todd Orlando, and I had to Google. I didn't know where he was. Where is he?
He's at South Florida, right?
He is at South Florida. Good job. He's leading their defense. So just a little shout out, Todd Orlando.
We're always thinking about you, bud.
He should have got he should have got the job over Major. That was a debate you and I had for a long time. But yeah, no, I think the new DC, what we're going to expect from this new scheme, I think we're just going to see more discipline, more cohesion among the players. Last year we didn't seem like the players really understood what was happening in coverages. There were so many blown coverages, and they didn't seem like they were.
I felt like it was too complex, almost maybe for the guys at times.
I mean, lots. When somebody would go in motion, there were lots of hands waving, guys sprinting to get in position, like just seeing like, oh no, I shouldn't be following him, and then a guy's in motion and he's in the flat and there's nobody within 5 yards from him, and you see a U of H linebacker sprinting to the sideline to try and get there. It just seemed like there was a lot of confusion on that sense. And in no way am I an X's and O's guy, but I can count multiple times last year where I saw a mismatch. I mean, again, I know how to count players, and they would send somebody in motion, or they'd line up and there would be 3 receivers or 2 receivers and a tight end. 3 guys would go out on a route, and there was a corner and a safety. And I'm like, I'm not a DC. I don't know how to scheme a defense.
If I'm seeing this.
But I do know that 3 is great. The alligator eats the 3. So the 3 has a big advantage there. And so they were basically just letting guys pick up 5 yards, 6 yards constantly last year, and I think you saw most on like the team just being awful at third down defense. You saw, oh my gosh, yes,
just whatever we would dial up in those situations, it just like it didn't click, it didn't work with the guys.
Yeah, and it, to your point that you said earlier, it just seemed like it was too complex. Like there was just too much going on, and like I said, there was lots of hand waving and things like that where it seemed like linebackers and safeties and corners were checking out of different coverages going, okay, actually I'm moving to a hook zone. You're playing the flat, and I was playing the flat, but now you need to take it because this guy went in. Like it just seemed, I'm not saying that defenses need to be simple. College defenses are very complicated. You have to beat complicated college offenses. But it seemed like it was too complicated. Like the guys didn't know what they were doing at times. And is that a player's issue? Maybe. But it's also a coaching issue, because if you notice your players don't understand, you need to simplify it. Play cover 2. Every guy has been playing cover 2 since they were 10. I could go out, you could put me at linebacker right now, and I could go out there and I could stand in my zone and at least go, okay, I know I'm playing weak side linebacker. I know this general area would be my coverage. So it just didn't seem like it was very adaptable, and I'm hoping that we're going to see that this year. And then last year, it seemed like we really depended on speed under the last administration, that we were just going to outspeed you and we were going to swarm to the football. And we talked about earlier the reputation and the style we were trying to play, and that's what we said, right, in our discussions a couple of weeks ago, where what was this offense trying to do? Had no idea. What was this defense trying to do? It was trying to overwhelm you with speed. It wasn't going to overpower you. If you were somebody who had a lot of power, you were going to be able to move the ball on us, but we were going to bring 3 guys to tackle you. There were going to be 3 or 4 guys there swarming the football. The problem is we quit swarming at some point. We didn't have the speed that we were trying to do. I think with this new 3-4, we're going to see a little bit more power and less of a reliance on speed going forward.
Yeah, the only nuggets I have in terms of like the more, I guess, X's and O's stuff, 3 down linemen, like we said, traditional nose and 2 DNs going with a rush end, which looks like it'll be called the dog position under the staff. On the most recent U of H roster, I saw Brandon Mack, Nadame Tucker, Torin Cabagel, Zion Taylor, and Kevin Tully were all the guys listed at the dog position. I've had to guess the 3 veteran guys I mentioned earlier there, Tucker, Mack, and Cabagel, will probably get the most snaps there early this season. I think we'll see the linebackers play a bigger role in this defense than we've seen the past couple. Every defense or defensive coordinator likes to advertise themselves as doing things like aggressive, creating havoc, or things like that. I think Wood, like we talked about a bit ago, actually has some on-field track record as a DC to back that up, which encourages me in the long term, even if I'm going to say for the umpteenth time that he's not a miracle worker, and it'll probably take years, plural, for this to start looking like a defense that's not like the last 2 that were pretty bad. All right, next question, Bobby. If you're out of 3-4 defense thoughts, who do you think is going to be the best defensive player for this coming season who is not on last year's roster, and show your work?
Okay, so I'm going to say a name, and I will be honest, I tried really hard to see if he was hurt or if he was like taking a red shirt. So if I am wrong here, you can correct me. But it is a transfer, Hershey McLaurin. Is that who you got, or is he hurt?
No, it is. It is what
Yeah. I mean,
we did not compare our answers.
We did not compare answers. So Sam, just full disclosure, Sam came up with these questions, and we kind of worked through them together, and we had I added a couple of things like that, but it's kind of hard to follow if you're going through a move or something like that, not to make excuses. Who's hurt? What happened in spring ball? What happened in summer ball? What's happened in summer camp? That kind of stuff. But Hershey McLaurin, when he came in as a transfer, that had me super excited. Transfer from West Virginia, played 24 games. So he played in every game. 9th best safety in Big 12, according to PFF. Really exciting to see that talent heading to Houston. Another place, the defensive backfield, a place where we could really use the help. And so Hershey McLaurin is my choice. I had another option, and I'll actually talk about him in the next part. But Hershey McLaurin was my choice. And you said you got the same one. Why did you choose him, bud?
Because I think this U of H defense didn't have a guy like McLaurin last year on the field. A big, tall, rangy safety capable of both making a play in coverage and also getting up and run support, occasionally making a play behind the line of scrimmage. Martin Marroquin, former U of H scouting guy we had on last week, McLaurin was one of the first guys that he mentioned.
I forgot about that, yeah.
We asked him at the end about players for the current roster. McLaurin was one of the first names he brought up. Martin certainly knows more about football than you or I, so a good pick just in that strength. And kind of like you said, it may be simplistic, but if the guy was good enough to start most of last season and get on the field for nearly every game the last 2 seasons for a West Virginia defense that certainly last year was much better than the one the Cougars fielded, I feel like that's means
Except
he's good enough
play.
good enough to be an impact guy on this defense. So I mean, like, if he was on a great defense, Bobby, all due respect, he wouldn't be here. He'd probably still be at West Virginia, or he would have had a transfer destination that projects to be a better team this current year than U of H. So not a perfect resume, but that this is not me. I think this guy is going to be one of our better defensive starters this year. I also like our track record generally with guys who played Mississippi JUCO ball over the years as well, which is where McLaurin started his college career. So that was just one small piece. So yeah, no, we completely independently both landed on Hershey McLaurin for this one.
Very, very nice. Yeah, he Mississippi Community College, buddy, coming through, giving us a ton of good talent. So, but yeah,
I was gonna say Sammy Brown from the 2011 football team is enough for me to give it to Mississippi junior colleges for.
But yeah, Hershey McLaurin, just one of those guys. Just seems like a dude. Not going to win not going to be an All-American, but we don't need All-Americans at this point. We just need guys who can contribute and can contribute well quickly.
Exactly. So what's the position group you are most optimistic about and why, Bobby?
All right, so I'm going to go here with the defensive backs. Now, again, it seems like based on your face, you went with the same answer.
Maybe so.
But they're returning some talent. Also brought in a ton of transfers. Normally that's kind of a concern when you see this many transfers in one position group coming in. You'd go, ooh, maybe they're not too confident and we're just trying to test out a bunch of guys who can who might work. But here's the thing, the guys they brought in to see who they're going to work are some legitimate guys. Hershey and JD Rhyme should really bring up the talent on this. Just those two transfers alone should really bring up the defensive backfield talent up to a level where I'm going to feel pretty good about what we put out there. And that's kind of been a weakness of this team the last couple of years is who's going to play corner, who's going to play safety, what's it going to look like? And I distinctly remember last year doing our preview and going, I really hope that we can get to the quarterback quick because I don't know how quickly or how long we're going to be able to hold guys from scoring quickly. And yeah, we did not, and it showed. So defensive backs, I think, is going to give. I think the coverage is going to be a little bit better and give us a little bit more reason to believe in our defensive line as well. So who'd you choose, bud?
I also have defensive backs, acknowledging that I think every level of this defense has some amount of uncertainty. And I think a lot of that maybe is just me buying into the Latrell McCutcheon hype. The cornerback who played at Oklahoma and USC previously, sat out last year, was one of the last group of guys to actually sit out because he was a 2-time transfer. And I think if Isaiah Hamilton was coming back instead of being at Ole Miss right now, I think this would be almost such an obvious thing that we wouldn't have asked the question. Hamilton wasn't perfect, but I mean, he was the only corner we've had since Marcus Jones and Demarius Williams left the NFL who showed even an occasional ability to create havoc on defense positively for the Cougs. Everything we've heard from spring ball and fall camp, not just from Martin Marroquin last week, but including him as well, has been about how good McCutcheon is and just how many different people with different perspectives have said, oh yeah, the staff is just absolutely over the moon about how good this guy is and what a leader he is and how good he is compared to all of his teammates. I think it all comes down to some combination of believing that this many different people can't be imagining that McCutcheon is this good. And kind of like you said, that you're bringing in so many interesting guys like Brian Massey from SMU, Jeremiah Wilson from Syracuse, JD Rhyme, who you mentioned, Ajani Carter, Chris Davis, and also Jalen Emery back from last year at cornerback. I don't think it's unrealistic that McCutcheon and one or two of those guys just mentioned can do more positive things at cornerback than the guys you had there last year with Isaiah Hamilton. At safety, you have AJ Halsey returning, plus Kentrell Webb, who was a real breakout Tulane player last year as a redshirt freshman, Hershey McLaurin, who you and I have both waxed poetic about, Tegan Wilco, a veteran multi-year starter from East Carolina, along with returning guys Jawan Gatson, Noah Guzman, Maurice Williams, a freshman, might be a guy to watch long-term as well. Like the cornerbacks, probably not all these guys are going to end up being above average contributors, but you only need some combo really of Halsey, McLaurin, and Webb performing better than the group of guys did last year for this to be a better safety group, better cornerback group. I'm not expecting miracles, but I think there are enough promising players out of all the guys we've talked about that this will be the strength of the Cougar defense.
Yep, absolutely. So let me ask you this, buddy. We talked about optimistic. Who are you pessimistic? What group are you pessimistic on heading into the 2024 season?
Yeah, I'd say the group I'm most pessimistic or concerned about, if you want to phrase it that way, even though the staff did a lot to address this group since they've come in, it's got to be the linebackers. And I think if Corey Platt Jr., who was a really exciting Tulane transfer, wasn't slated to miss this season injured, I might not have picked this group. He was a really promising player. I hope he's able to get back in the field at some point in his career if his body allows. You do have Jamal Morris back here, which I think is a positive. He's a guy who could really benefit from this new scheme. Kendra Gant, a grad transfer from UAW, who is an all-conference Sun Belt player, I think really fits what the staff wants to do, is almost like a heat-seeking missile from every highlight video I've watched of the guy. Michael Batten, a really cool story, veteran transfer from ULM, worked his way from being a walk-on at HBU, and don't worry about it, they will never be anything other than HBU to me.
See, I only call them HCU to my friend who went to HBU because he's like, it'll always be HBU, and I just call him HCU, but I will always call them HBU as well.
Thank you. To JUCO quarterback, to switching to linebacker and walking on at ULM, and then working his way into being their tackles leader last year. Really cool story. A trio of intriguing younger guys as well. Jalen Garner and LaTravion McCutcheon, who are both returners, and LSU transfer Christian Brathwaite, who's a big recruit locally and is a redshirt freshman, played in 5 games for LSU, kind of as a special teams guy last year. I think the linebacker group is a more intriguing group than it was a year ago, but there are just so many question marks, and it's not the deepest group either. Like, if one or two of the guys they just mentioned by name gets hurt, I mean, you're really digging into guys who you're probably not expecting to start. Ideally, you're going from a scheme from 2 linebackers to 4. You just don't have a lot proven there. That was the only group I could pick, unfortunately. And I still think there are things to be positive about. I still think the scheme makes more sense for these guys than it was before. But yeah, linebackers.
Yeah, I went defensive line. And I
disagree finally. I'm happy about that.
Yeah. I don't have, this is, we talked earlier about vibes. This is purely a vibes pick for me. I wasn't impressed with the defensive line last year, and I was trying to remember, like, oh man, who do we got coming back? All this kind of stuff. Like, maybe and we have some people returning, but it's still a really young room. Like, I went through the roster, and it's like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, sophomore, freshman. Like, it's a really young room, a young, inexperienced room. And just like I said, I don't have any logic behind it, but we didn't do a ton in the transfer market, it felt like, on the defensive line. I wasn't overly impressed with the defensive line last year. It wasn't like, I think last year you and I may have said, if I have to hear Sack Avenue one more time in a game where we don't get a sack, we're going to lose our minds. Like, there were games last year where the defensive line just kind of seemed to disappear a little bit. And I don't necessarily see anything that would have necessarily gotten better off of that heading into 2024.
Yeah, I like a couple interior guys. I like Justin Benton and AJ Holmes. Yeah. I think those guys are both 2 nice pieces to build around, younger interior linemen, but yeah, very, very young guys. It is interior line on either side of the ball is very merciless to, youth. Like, that is one position where contributing your first year or 2 of your career, which is why Ed Oliver was such an absolute, unbelievable, once in a generation outlier of a guy. It takes years, plural, to like be able to really contribute there.
Yeah, when you're 18, you don't have the body to go up against a
21 or 22-year-old. Yeah,
you just a guard or center there. And in this new scheme, in this new 3-4, you need interior linemen to just clog up offensive linemen. And I just don't see. To your point, they're good pieces, but they are young, and I just don't see them necessarily being able to do that and saving our linebackers for being heat-seeking missiles. So that's why I'm a little concerned with the D-line.
I will say I really like who Willie Fritz brought in.
How many times do we do that this season?
Oh man, I hope less than 10, but I'm not confident in that.
We're at 1.
We brought in after Brian Early left, kind of late, not super late, but late-ish in the coaching cycle to take the same job at the University of Missouri. Brought in Oscar Giles, who was the defensive line coach Herman's 2 years here, if that's a familiar name to you. A guy who's coached a ton of defensive line over his career, did a very good job coaching in that group at the time Herman was here, coached some good defensive lines at UT Austin, both under Mac Brown and under Herman when he moved over to the Burt Orange School. A guy who, for that late in a cycle, and he was at Wyoming recently when they were as part of some really good defenses as the defensive line coach. I believe he's the associate head coach there under Craig Bull as well. Like, I think somebody who I was shocked we were able to get him at that point in the cycle. I was really, really, really excited that we got him. Don't necessarily disagree with all your larger points, though. You're losing Nelson Caesar, you're losing as an edge rusher, and losing Jamari Caldwell, a guy who on the interior was good enough that Oregon, elected to have them a national championship contender as part of their program. Like,
yep.
Those are 2 big losses. Those are not easily replaced losses.
Yeah, that's really what it was, is just a vibes pick. I wasn't amazed by the D-line last year, and I didn't see it getting better.
So this is the defense and special teams preview. We're going to talk about special teams because, Bobby, Willie Fritz is at heart a special teams coach. And this isn't some secret insight on my part. He's very public about it when he talks
in
to
every
media.
Every one of his coaching clinics. He talks
exactly.
about it.
Any report of practice mentions how Fritz is hands-on with the various special teams things. There's even a for sale DVD from American Football Monthly's 90s style website where you can get 51 minutes of, at the time, Central Missouri head coach Willie Fritz guiding you through the following points. Bobby, you ready?
Yep.
Point 1, the importance of having goals for your special teams.
Okay.
Point 2, selecting the right personnel for each phase of special teams play. Point 3.
You got to do it.
Point 3, this is important. Complete practice scheduling for all 6 phases of special teams play. Point 4, fundamentals and techniques and drills to improve your special teams play. And point 5, last but not least, utilizing practice time for special teams as efficiently as possible. Okay, you can't argue this man loves special teams.
Hold on. I have questions. Number 1,
I've not gotten
this video.
Look, I was going to say, at some point during this season, I think, not to plan our podcast, I feel like you and I should each get this DVD, watch it, and report back here.
Okay, here's my suggestion. All right, we are going to get it, and we will do a breakdown of it on a special Patreon episode.
Boom.
All right.
If you need another reason, go to patreon.com/shpodcast. Us breaking down Willie Fritz's what was it called again? God, why didn't I write the name of it down?
So what we'll do is we will get it, we will watch it, and then I will volunteer to do this now. I will do one of the drills. I will go buy a football and I will do one of the drills.
Oh, it's fantastic.
All right. I will learn how to punt
everything you should know about special teams. That's what's
everything.
Called.
Everything. Okay, perfect.
Special teams.
So we will do that. Sam, we'll talk about this afterwards, but we'll set a patron goal. If we hit the goal, then we'll do it.
There we go.
All right, perfect.
But this man loves special teams. That is the long and circuitous point that I'm making here. Love can't fix what was, I think, a weakness of this program the last 2 seasons. So this has all been a big, long wind up to, I think, a 2-part discussion question here. How do you think Willie Fritz improves Cougar special teams immediately, and what would be realistic improvement for what we can see from last year this year?
You know, I tried to think of this question more in the totality of the Dana Holgorsen era. And I really think as a whole of the Dana Holgorsen era, we had decent special teams. I thought we were pretty good. We lost some kicking last year. We lost some kicking consistency with our punters and our kickers. And I don't necessarily think that was a scheme or something like that problem. I think it was we didn't have the kickers we needed to make field goals consistently. Before last year, I had a lot of confidence that going out there to kick a 35, 40 yarder, I had some confidence that it was going to go through the uprights. Last year, I didn't get that. And just like everything it seems that's going to happen with Willie Fritz going forward is the little things on the margins are going to get better, right? You're not going to see this where we're suddenly making 55-yarders and it's no big deal or anything like that. We're not suddenly going to become number 1 in return touchdowns suddenly because we have some crazy schemes on kickoff returns or punt returns or something like that. But you're just going to see, instead of, I didn't even look up what our net return was last year, but let's just say it's 10 yards per punt return, you're going to see it turn to 13 or 14. Just those little things on the edges that often get overlooked in box scores and things like that. And that play-by-play, you just kind of scroll past it. I think they're just going to get a little bit better. I think we're just going to see an overall more disciplined, just slightly better at everything on special teams. I think we're going to make a couple of field goals more this year, right? The percentage is going to jump up 3-4 points. I think we're going to make some smarter decisions on what we do in terms of kicking field goals. I think last year with Dana, there was a lot of like, is he going to kick it here? Is he not? Why would he kick the 50-yarder here, but then on 4th and 2, but then on 4th and 7, It would be a 45.
We tried a lot of longer field goals with not having a proven D1 kicker on the roster.
Exactly. And so he would go like 4th and 2, let's kick the 50-yarder. And then it'd be like 4th and 3, or 4th and 7 and a 45-yarder. And he'd be like, we're going to go for it. And so you just didn't know what was happening. And I think that happened a lot last year as well, is the kicker had the leg to get the ball there, but maybe he wasn't quite as good from the hash marks. And I think we saw that. And I think that is a talent, a player thing, but I just think we're going to see those little things just get a little bit better.
I think a quick reminder of the past head coach and past few that as Cougar fans, we are pretty spoiled for riches in terms of getting to watch electric return guys. Tank Dell, Marcus Jones, Marquez Stevenson, Matthew Golden, Brandon Wilson. You go back even further, Tyron Carrier.
Yeah.
All guys who are very good to generational, almost college return guys. I think we should take a moment to appreciate that. And I'm not sure we have an electric return guy like that on the roster because guys like that don't grow on trees. I mean, you do have Brian Mask, who I mentioned earlier. The cornerback coming in has 2 return touchdowns in his SMU career, including one in that crazy U of H SMU win in 2021, but wasn't really SMU's primary return guy most of the last 2 seasons. I think the area where we see the biggest positive impact, and I think we kind of agree on this, Bobby, I think it's coverage. I think it's the team not beating itself because of a special teams missed alignment or a penalty. And this wasn't last year's team's biggest problem. I would agree with you on the whole, certainly not close to the biggest problem the Cougar football program had under Dana Holgerson. And lots of special teams were really positives. Dell, Golden, and Jones were all very good return men to differing degrees. But you had things like Tank Dell losing a return touchdown in a close loss to Tech in 22 because of a completely boneheaded penalty, allowing 3 kick return touchdowns as a team in 2021 as well. Compare that, Bobby. How many times in the last 5 seasons do you think a Tulane team has allowed a return touchdown of any kind? Last 5 seasons.
5 years?
Yes.
4.
1. They allowed 1 return touchdown in the last 5 seasons, none in the last 3. Dang. So I think even with this roster not having a guy who has, say, Matthew Golden's game-breaking return ability, though I hope I'm wrong, I think Fritz's presence will be a net positive when it comes to fewer mistakes, better coverage, and maybe more consistent decision-making, like you said, on when to kick. I think a lot of times, Dana asked Jack Martin, who last season was his first being the primary place kicker for any college, to attempt a lot of stuff. Because I looked at his misses and makes, and not saying he shouldn't have been better, but he was asked to go from 45 plus a lot. Mm-hmm. And 45, that's kind of the mark where I stopped being really confident unless the guy is like a proven, like Dalton Witherspoon, I would say your kicker until from, 2018 to 21, I would trust him from that distance. Don't know if I would trust Jack Martin or any of the current guys that are not Jack Martin.
And see, I go 40 yard. My college kicker, I want them to be, I want them to be automatic from in front of 40, from 40 to 45. I want them to be pretty good. But 45 plus, it's a coin toss, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Martin was 3 of 9 from any kick that was 40 yards or longer last year, which I think requires improvement there, but maybe also put him in a position to succeed. I think it's hard to envision the punting improving. You're going from a veteran like Lane Wilkins, who decided to call it a college career, to likely yet another Aussie, freshman Liam Doherty from Geelong, Australia. And I will say Wilkins and Dane Roy, his predecessor, both had solid freshman seasons, so I think Doherty will end up doing fine, but probably not on the same level as a guy who was a 4-year starter last year. I think I just want this special teams to be a solid B- C+ group. And I think that's pretty realistic, even if I don't think there's a guy on the roster capable of being a game-breaking return guy. I think if this isn't a group that loses you games.
A game-breaking return guy doesn't exist on a C+. Right? Yeah. That's part. I would say when we've had game-breaking guys, we had B pluses, right? They're worth that letter grade. And if we don't think that there's going to be somebody who's going to break it open with regularity, like Marquez Stevenson did, or Tank Dell did, it's hard to knock them for that and be like, oh, they're only a C plus when they don't have a guy who can just absolutely take it to the house at any instant. Like C+ is a solid, C+ B- is a solid special teams unit.
Don't lose those games. That's I think the hope here.
Yep, and that's the deal that you want with any of your special teams. Don't lose us games, play solid, and don't do anything dumb that gets us in trouble. No roughing, no personal foul roughing the kickers that, set a team up for a
quick aside
drive, something
that was so brutal. Like the Tank Dell one was so brutal because he had that one taken away against UTSA for completely different, just like a phantom. Like I know that counts against your special teams, but like a phantom call basically, and lost it because of that, and then lost it for a very not phantom call the next week against Texas Tech. It was a fun season, wasn't it?
It was a season, bud.
All right, is that all the defense and special teams thoughts you have, Bobby?
That's all I got, buddy. Let's talk about some Cougar women's soccer, bud.
Yeah, that was a roller coaster of a week. It went from, I would say starting, it was weird. I started doing our preview notes last week, pretty pessimistic about Cougar soccer. And then when I got done with that, I would say I was slightly more optimistic. I did the usual preseason research. And after the opener, I would say my slight optimism was intact. And then after Sunday night's home opener, I would say I am back to now how I felt at the end of last season. Very pessimistic about this program doing any better than being your preseason pick of 14th out of 16 in the Big 12. Yeah, so let's talk about the first one, Bobby, the 1-0 loss to the UT Austin Longhorns on the road. I was still, like I said, reasonably optimistic after that opener. I mean, the first 15, 20 minutes were pretty rough, but yeah, I think maybe at the time the Horns would have felt a bit unfortunate to only be up 1-0. But after that, I thought the Cougs got into the game a little bit more to close the first half. And really throughout this game, in a game where the home team had a lot of possession, but maybe didn't create as many dangerous chances as you would think, based on shots on goal, I don't think the Cougs looked very fluid possessing. You and I kind of talked about that. Didn't really ever have a coherent attack, but I thought we were able to, still acknowledging that, created more promising chances offensively than I expected coming into the game. I mean, it's a 1-0 loss where you couldn't say the Cougars were unlucky to have lost or were anything better than the second best of those two teams. But I mean, I don't think either of us going into that one, or anyone even following this program, were hoping for anything other than just the team not being completely blown out. And they definitely cleared that bar in the opener.
Yeah, I thought the opener, it was odd. Like I was happy to see it was only 1-0 when I tuned in right after Texas scored their goal, and I was like, okay, we look okay, but it just seemed like there wasn't quite that team cohesion that you see from other programs. You kind of watch the Texas team, and you got to admit Texas is good at that sport, right? What were they? 17,
number 17, yeah,
number 17 in the country.
At worst, one of the best 2 or 3 teams we'll see this season.
Yeah, and it looked it right. They looked like they were the much better team. So coming away 1-0 felt pretty good. It just seemed like there were some things that seemed basic that we just couldn't do. We didn't hold possession very much, but after kind of talking it out with you, you kind of talked me off the ledge, just going like, yeah, no, that's one of the better teams that we're going to see this year. You can't really expect them to hold possession a ton and do all that, especially coming off the season that they had last year. And I was like, you know what? 1-0 to number 17. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And if that's a indicator of things to come, then I should get pretty excited about the upcoming games and the upcoming season. So I was super excited to go to Sunday. And what happened in that game, Sam?
Bobby, it was not an indicator of good things to come.
Oh no.
The Cougs, for the first time in program history, lost to Sam Houston State. Cougs took an early lead thanks to a Cameron Maddox goal, but lost that lead less than 20 minutes later. And despite having certainly the largest amount of possession and shots in the remaining 60-ish minutes of the on-field action, I don't think the Cougars were unlucky to only have one goal when it was all said and done. Unfortunately, down 3-1 at full time. Maybe Sam Houston was somewhat lucky to score 3 goals on a total of 4 shots on target, but 2 of those goals were pretty good chances. And one of the 3 was a very high degree of difficulty goal, but the run-up to it was still U of H allowing Sam to retain possession in a dangerous area and it coming back to bite them. I mean, this Sam Houston team, preseason 5th out of 10 in Conference USA. And with all respect to the Cats of the K, I think I'm not afraid of saying something as broad as this. This is a program U of H should never lose to, point blank. That this is happening in the 3rd year of Jaime Frias's time here, the staff's time here, where almost the entire roster, if not the entire roster, consists of players recruited by this staff, I think it's the biggest red flag you could possibly imagine. And I will note, two of your very best players from last season, Ariana Jemison, your preseason all-conference pick, and Sophia Weber, have not been able to play in either of the two matches so far this season, but this program should never be 1 to 2 players away from losing to Sam Houston. Full stop.
Yep.
I'm going to do some thinking on the length of Frias's contract here, but I'm guessing he received a 3 or 4 year one when he was hired in early 22, Bobby. And if he didn't get the Pesman special extension, I would assume it's 4 years, and it's hard to feel like right now we're doing anything other than just waiting this head coach out.
Yeah, I've said this to you and Dustin before, like, in terms of resources and all that kind of stuff, Texas should never lose to us in mini sports, right? Just with their funding and all that kind of stuff. That's Sam to us. I hate to say it, but we probably should.
This isn't even like you know how Texas lost to us in men's basketball. This isn't even Sam's like one program that they're just kick ass.
This isn't like Sam baseball, where they're like, oh no, that's actually a really solid baseball team. No, we lost to their not great team, and so it just doesn't. Yeah, to your point, it just doesn't feel like things are headed in the direction we want them to head.
If you're wondering whether there are any natural candidates if U of H did decide to replace Frias, I think the only thing that would really give U of H have urgency to replace Frias, Nathan Kogan at Lamar, in 2 seasons has led that program to 2 NCAA appearances, dog-walked their conference both seasons, also dog-walked the Cougs when U of H traveled to Lamar in 22. Before his time at Lamar, was a well-regarded assistant at Texas A&M. He'd be the biggest reason to make a change after this season unless the results radically change. Up next is SFA at home and on the road at Tarleton on Sunday. Fingers crossed that we don't have any more humiliating soccer losses to talk about next week, Bobby.
Yeah, that would suck.
I mean, we have a football game and a volleyball season to preview next week. I might just skip it if one of those is a loss. I'm just going to be fully transparent. All right, Bob. I think we did it in a svelte 80-ish minutes. You want to take us home?
All right, of course. Well, that's it for this week's pod. Just some final housekeeping. If you have some feedback for Samurai or you just want to talk U of H sports, you can find us on Twitter at SH Podcast. If you want just me, since I tend to steer a little bit away from the SH Podcast account at times, you can find me at #1Coug. And if you want to talk to Dustin because you miss him or he's just more of your jam, you can reach out to us at Blue Sky on Blue Sky podcast.bsky.social.
Look at
right?
that.
You can find Dustin there. Podcast at bsky.social or whatever it is. If you hate social media and you only use email, you can get us at shpodcast@gmail.com. And if you really, really want to find us, you can go to shpodcast.com. I think that still is in existence.
Don't know about that one, bud.
All right. I thought
long-term project this season. We still have the domain name, but I might need to do a little website,
little updating. You can find us all over the place. Also, give us a 5-star review if you haven't. We really appreciate that. I know it sounds crazy, but all those kind of things really, really, truly do help. And if you've heard all of this and you're like, wow, I cannot wait to get those guys to watch a Willie Fritz special teams video that we are going to pay for out of our own pockets, you can join our Patreon. You can check us out on Patreon. And like Sam said, hopefully we're going to be doing, if we're not traveling to games, we are going to be doing some kind of post-game show to give some initial reactions. And if you are still here, you are our absolute favorites. And as always,
go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs! Let's go!